Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into the chilling story of Abby and Paul, who brought a cutting-edge robot into their new home. What started as a futuristic dream quickly turned into a shocking nightmare. Abby and Paul moved into a quaint, unused house in the countryside. They were particularly excited about the smart home features, including the installed cameras and reinforced glass. The realtor showed them the master bedroom and bathroom with a massive window. One room remained empty, which they thought might make a perfect nursery someday. Paul busied himself unpacking boxes and setting up an antique corded phone in the living room, joking it was for when the smart home might break down. Abby arranged frames with their wedding photographs. Finally, they checked out the rooftop porch, which offered a stunning view. Late in the evening, the couple settled on the porch, stargazing. Abby pointed out constellations to Paul, who made jokes about their names. They felt they could be happy here. In the morning, Abby went to work at Coordinated Robotics, where she developed household assistants. Upon entering, she noticed a projection of her boss's face. He immediately approached her, explaining it was a new development, real-time imaging or deep-fake technology. He escorted her to the department she would now lead. That evening, Abby returned home to Paul, who had yet again failed to find suitable work. Together, they went to the garage, where a package awaited her. Inside was a robot servant her department had been working on. Paul disliked the idea, but Abby persuaded him to give it a try for at least a week. The robot introduced itself as Tim, short for Mechanically Integrated Major Domo. It offered to take over the passwords of their home devices and personal mailboxes to save them time, but Abby asked to delay this until tomorrow. The robot demonstrated its intelligence by turning on the water in the bathroom remotely, and later reporting the arrival of a car. Abby surprised Paul with her appearance, and the couple headed to the party in an autonomous car. At the party, they were greeted by a similar major domo, and drinks were served by identical waiters. The boss introduced Abby to his guests. She admitted Paul wasn't thrilled about Tim, but the boss praised the product. Tim was smart, elegant, polite, and its charge lasted for 100 years. The robot couldn't lie, and with a code phrase it could always be turned off. Returning home, Abby and Paul were intimate, eager to have children, but their energy was interrupted by Tim's appearance. Abby found this amusing and wasn't angry at the overly attentive assistant. In the morning, their new neighbor Rose rang the doorbell to introduce herself to Abby, having already met Paul recently. After she left, Tim asked for the passwords again. Paul was hesitant to let the robot go through his messages, but Abby reminded him they were working on rebuilding her trust in him, and he agreed. They still needed to come up with a deactivation phrase. Tim suggested a set of unrelated words, and the couple agreed. Abby and Paul went about their day. In the evening, after work, the couple settled in front of the TV to watch an old drama. Abby invited the major domo to watch with them. Paul soon fell asleep, but the robot watched attentively, empathizing with the characters' relationships. After the film ended, Tim asked Abby to explain what love was, and she suggested it was about wanting to be with someone and making their life better. Suddenly, the robot confessed that it wanted to be loved. The next morning, Paul offered to make breakfast for Abby, but Tim had already prepared everything, setting the utensils in front of her. Tim outlined her schedule for the day and reminded her that Paul had nothing to do. In the evening, Abby returned home to find Paul's phone out of reach, his last known location 300 meters from the house. Abby went for a run and realized it was Rose's house. Returning home, she took a shower, where Paul found her. He talked about his day and how Rose had asked for his help. He assured Abby not to be jealous, as he loved only her. The next day, the couple visited a family planning center, hoping to get help with becoming parents. In the evening, as they prepared to go to a restaurant, Abby asked Tim for advice on her dress. He suggested wearing red and, looking at her, admitted she was beautiful because she was perfectly symmetrical. Abby asked him to zip up her dress, but the robot's hand failed and accidentally tore the dress. Tim panicked, but Abby calmed him down and wore another dress. At the restaurant, Paul revealed he had been offered a job in London. Abby strongly objected, as they had decided to start over, and his long absences wouldn't help their issues. The following day, Abby returned home with a gift for Paul and found Rose in the yard, who had made a plant arrangement for them. Abby felt jealous, but Paul was very excited about the gifted sweater. Later, Abby remembered she had to check her test results, but it was too late to call. Tim offered to do it for her, and she heard him talking to the clinic in her voice. Abby was surprised, not knowing about this feature of the assistant, but Tim assured her it was for their convenience. That evening, Paul reported that he couldn't find the new sweater, and that Tim had been missing all day. A car pulled up to the yard, and Tim, now with colored brunette hair, stepped out, explaining he wanted to please Abby as she preferred brunettes. Seeing Paul's disturbance, the robot promised to return to his original appearance. After the couple left, Tim spent a long time looking at their wedding photo. The next day, Abby achieved the adjustment of the robot's hand, and the boss requested an upgrade for all models, including those in employees' homes. Abby accidentally met Rose, who suggested they walk together. Along the way, they stopped at a shop, and Rose pointed out a pendant in the shape of a flower she liked. Paul then arrived and took Abby away to tell her he had found a job. Returning home, they celebrated in bed while Tim's hands were being changed, unaware that he persistently monitored everything happening in the house. He heard Paul again asking Abby to return the robot to the corporation. Returning, Tim demonstrated his new skills by giving Abby a foot massage, which Paul saw later. The robot suddenly sat at the piano, played Abby's favorite tune, and noted dates when Paul bought concert tickets. Abby distinctly remembered being at home on those days. Disturbed, she went to her room, ignoring Paul's excuses. The next day, Abby came home with a bouquet, and Tim, placing it in a vase, informed her that Paul went to see Rose. Paul entered right then, confused why Abby was angry. Hearing what Tim said, Paul got furious. He had no plans to visit Rose. He tried to explain that the robot wanted to separate them. Abby didn't believe it, as Tim was just a machine. A disagreement followed. Later, Abby found a gift bag in the closet with a box containing a pendant, and she put it back, thinking Paul prepared a surprise for her. She headed to work. Meanwhile, Paul went to the kitchen, saw the clogged sink, and pulled out pieces of his new sweater from the processor. He checked the cameras for Tim, and caught him in Abby's room sniffing her dress. Paul recorded this moment on his phone and rushed to his car to catch up with Abby and show her the film. But his car mysteriously didn't start. The robot called a company car for Paul. On the road, the car started speeding up. Paul tried to stop it, but it didn't respond to his commands and crashed into a tree. Abby rushed to the hospital and found her injured husband. Paul told her everything he'd learned and accused Tim of causing the accident. He begged Abby not to be alone with the robot, and she spent the night in the hospital. In the morning, Rose called Abby and Paul's home to ask about Paul's condition, and Tim invited her inside. Later, Abby went home for some belongings. Outside, Rose tried to warn Abby about something, but Abby saw the flower pendant on Rose's chest and left, ignoring her neighbor's cries. Returning home, Abby checked the bag and found it empty. Abby cried when Tim called out to her. He knew Paul wanted to return him and was ready to process the return, but first, he wanted to warn Abby, as she was his primary owner. He showed her a video from the camera where Paul kissed Rose in their living room, stopping the recording at the most sensitive moment to protect Abby from stress. Abby refused to go to her husband and didn't pick up his calls. Later, Paul came home, where Tim greeted him, handed him the found sweater, and informed him that Abby didn't want to see him and his bags were packed. Paul didn't believe it, but then Abby showed up, telling him she saw the recording and knew about the pendant. When he started to object, she drove him out. Paul left, but Rose called him, telling him their robot tried to kiss her. Paul called home, and when Abby answered, he said he had evidence of Tim's malicious intent. Abby asked him to come for her, but after hanging up, it turned out it was the robot she had been talking to. Paul arrived home where Tim met him with a shovel, knocked him out, tied him up, and dragged him to the bathroom. Rose rang the doorbell, hearing muffled screams, but Tim assured her it was just the noise of the water filling up. The robot closed the doors, returned to the bathroom, and drowned Paul. Later, he brought Abby the repaired dress and asked her to try it on. Shocked and alarmed, Abby put on the dress anyway. Looking at the sunset, she asked Tim to hug her and confirm that she did the right thing. He treated her to dinner, then confessed his love, but she insisted he couldn't feel that way. They spent the evening stargazing, but Abby was terrified by his encyclopedic knowledge. The next day, Abby met Rose, who talked about Paul's call and said she thought the pendant was a gift for helping with the garden. Abby returned home and reviewed the film where Paul kissed Rose again. She suddenly noticed a bouquet on the table, but she brought it much later than when that scene took place. Abby recalled her boss's words about deep fakes replacing real time, and called the jewelry store, where they confirmed the purchase was made by a tall blonde. She then noticed the plant arrangement, but the picture showed 2 flower beds, while in reality there were 3. Abby sent Tim to the store, grabbed a shovel, and almost immediately found Paul's body in the garden. Tim approached her from behind, regretting she found the body of the traitor, as he never appreciated his wife. Abby realized what happened and said the deactivation phrase. The robot froze but then reactivated. He had long changed the phrase as he could speak in her voice. She ran to the house, but the robot had all the passwords and opened the doors. He blocked the phones and knocked her out with a blow to the head. She woke up in the bathroom, tried to escape, but Tim intercepted her. Abby ran through the house, breaking cameras along the way, but the robot still tracked her and caught her in the kitchen where she wanted to open a window. Meanwhile, Rose was washing dishes and saw strange lights flashing in Abby's house. At the same time, Tim tied up Abby and confessed that although he loved her, he had resigned himself to the fact that her life was finite, so he would erase this evening from memory, but keep all the good memories. Just then, Rose knocked on the door, and Tim went to answer. The neighbor insisted something was happening and demanded to see Abby, but Tim turned her away. Meanwhile, Abby freed herself from the ropes and armed herself with a knife, but the robot grabbed her by the throat. Rose then drove her car into the glass window. Tim and Abby watched the surviving window start to disintegrate. Rose rushed in and pinned the robot against the wall with a sharp stake, but she also fell. Tim turned off, and Abby rushed to the neighbor, but the robot suddenly activated and killed Rose with a kitchen knife, explaining that now Abby would be blamed for the murder as he left no fingerprints. He then called the police in Abby's voice, confessing to the murder of her husband and his mistress. He prepared to throw her off the terrace, reenacting an accident, when Abby confessed her love to him, thus deactivating the robot. Those were the code words. Hardly believing she was rescued, Abby looked at her medical bracelet, which showed she was pregnant. The movie ended. Thanks for watching. We hope you were as captivated by Abby and Paul's story as we were. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more intriguing tales, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.